There are moments in life when everything around you appears dry, and dry relationships, and dry finances, and dry opportunities, and dry joy, and dry hope, and you wake up in the morning, and though the sun is shining outside, there is a drought within your soul.
You smile before people, but inwardly you are weary. You keep moving, but something in your spirit whispers, there must be more than this. And I have come to tell you today, there is more.
And there is a power available to you that can transform what has been barren into something fruitful again. And there is a divine principle hidden in something so simple, so ordinary, so overlooked that many pass by it every single day and never understand the mystery it carries. And salt, and yes, salt, and something common, something small, something inexpensive, yet throughout Scripture it was never treated as ordinary. And because heaven has always loved using simple things to reveal extraordinary power, and not gold, and not diamonds, and not monuments, and but oil, and water, and bread, and dust, and in salt, and why? And because God is never limited by what man considers impressive, and sometimes we are waiting for complicated answers while heaven is waiting for simple obedience. And you have been asking for a miracle, but what if your breakthrough is hidden in your willingness to obey a simple instruction? And what if the answer you've been praying for is not in something grand, but in something symbolic? And salt represents preservation, and salt stops decay, and where there is corruption, salt resists it. And where there is contamination, salt purifies, and where things are rotting, salt slows destruction. And can you hear this in your spirit? And some of you are surrounded by areas in your life that have been under spiritual decay, and not because God abandoned you, but because something precious has been left exposed too long, and your peace has been exposed to fear, and your mind has been exposed to anxiety, and your home has been exposed to strife, and your purpose has been exposed to distraction, and now things feel unstable, but today there is a call to spiritual restoration. And salt also represents covenant, and a covenant is not casual, and a covenant is not temporary, and a covenant is sacred. And when salt was used, it symbolized something lasting, and something enduring, and something not easily broken. And some of you need to remember that what God promised you is not fragile, and His word over your life is not dissolving because circumstances changed, and His promise is not weaker because opposition increased, and what He spoke still stands, and even if your emotions disagree, and even if your environment disagrees, and even if people walked away, and even if doors closed, and even if it feels delayed. And a divine promise does not expire because of delay. And perhaps the greatest lesson here is this, and sometimes before transformation happens outwardly, there must first be an act of faith inwardly. And you may say, but how can something as simple as salt matter? And that is the wrong question, and the better question is, and can God attach significance to anything He chooses? And of course He can, and faith has never been about the object itself, and faith is about obedience connected to divine instruction. And Naaman was told to wash, and Moses was told to stretch out a rod, and a widow was told to gather vessels. And a blind man was told to go wash, and again, heaven partnered miracles with action, and not because God needed the action, but because obedience creates alignment, and an alignment makes room for manifestation, and some people want miracles without alignment, and blessings without surrender, and answers without obedience, and breakthrough without discipline. But spiritual laws cannot be mocked, and there is power in alignment, and there is power in consecration, And there is power in symbolic acts done in faith, and maybe today you need to make a prophetic decision, and not superstition, and not ritualism, and but intentional faith, and a heart posture that says, "And Lord, I am partnering with your word, and I am agreeing with heaven, and I am dedicating my home, my family, my mind, my future back to you." And there is something powerful about drawing a line in the spirit and saying, "And no more contamination here, and no more compromise here, and no more chaos here, and no more spiritual decay here. And this home belongs to God, and this family belongs to God, and this future belongs to God, and this mind belongs to God, and this body belongs to God, and this destiny belongs to God." And salt reminds us that small things matter, and do not underestimate what seems insignificant. And a small prayer can shift an atmosphere, and a small act of obedience can unlock a season. And a small decision can alter a generation, and a small seed can become a mighty harvest, and never despise small beginnings. And the kingdom often enters quietly before it manifests visibly, and a whisper before thunder, and a seed before harvest, and a drop before overflow. And some of you are frustrated because your miracle has not arrived in dramatic fashion. But miracles are not always loud, and sometimes they begin in silence, and sometimes healing begins before symptoms leave, and sometimes restoration begins before evidence appears, and sometimes doors are opening while you still think you are waiting. And do not measure divine activity by visible evidence alone, and God can be working in total silence, and He can be rearranging things while nothing appears to change, and He can be moving people, shifting timelines, opening pathways, removing obstacles, and you know nothing about it. And because He is God, and not a performer, and not an entertainer, and not bound to prove Himself on your schedule, and He moves according to wisdom, and according to timing, and according to purpose, and so trust Him. And trust Him when you understand, and trust Him when you do not, and trust Him in abundance, and trust Him in drought, and trust Him when prayers are answered quickly, and trust Him when prayers seem delayed, and because delay is not denial. And silence is not absence, and there are some listening right now who feel like their life has become bitter, and things once sweet now taste heavy, and joy has been replaced by exhaustion, and expectation has been replaced by disappointment. But I believe sweetness can return, and what was bitter can become whole again, and what was barren can become fruitful again, and what was contaminated can be purified again, and what was broken can be restored again. And this is the nature of God. And He specializes in reversals, and He turns mourning into dancing, and ashes into beauty, and darkness into testimony, and pain into purpose, and loss into wisdom, and impossibilities into evidence, and do not limit Him. And do not decide your story is over because you have experienced a difficult chapter, and a chapter is not the whole book. And this chapter may be painful, but it is not final, and He is still writing, and still moving, and still restoring, and still surprising, and still healing, and still delivering, and still opening impossible doors. And lift your expectation again, and hope again, and pray again, and believe again, and consecrate again, and trust again, and let your faith become active, and not passive, and not theoretical, and not occasional, and but living, and burning, and moving, and expectant, and because when heaven finds faith, heaven responds. And I believe that what has been stagnant is about to move, and what has been dry is about to receive rain, and what has been delayed is about to accelerate, and what has been closed is about to open, and what has been bitter is about to change. And not by might, and not by power, but by the Spirit of the living God. And when it happens, you will know this was not coincidence. And this was divine intervention, and this was grace, and this was mercy, and this was God. And so take hold of faith, and guard your atmosphere, and consecrate what belongs to heaven, and watch what God will do. And because one touch from God can change everything, and everything, sometimes people overlook the power of simple obedience because they are expecting something dramatic, complex, or extraordinary. Yet, throughout life, transformation often begins with one small instruction followed by one willing heart. What seems insignificant in the natural can carry spiritual significance when done in faith. Obedience is not always convenient, logical, or comfortable, but it creates alignment between your actions and divine direction. Many delays are not caused by a lack of opportunity, but by hesitation to take simple steps. A surrendered heart understands that greatness is often hidden in ordinary acts, and extraordinary outcomes can begin with humble, faithful obedience. And salt has long represented purity, preservation, and protection. Its purpose is to prevent decay, maintain freshness, and bring balance where corruption tries to spread. In spiritual symbolism, salt reminds us of the importance of guarding what is valuable in our lives. Just as salt preserves what would otherwise spoil, a disciplined and consecrated life protects peace, character, relationships, and purpose from gradual destruction. Small compromises can create openings for disorder, but intentional spiritual awareness helps maintain stability. Purity is not weakness, it is strength under control. Preservation requires consistency, wisdom, and the willingness to protect what has been entrusted to you. And faith is the invisible force that moves a person beyond limitation, fear, and uncertainty. It is not merely believing that something good can happen, but trusting deeply even when visible evidence is absent. Faith creates expectation, and expectation changes how you think, speak, and act. Many remain stuck because doubt keeps them focused on obstacles rather than possibilities. Genuine faith does not wait for perfect conditions before moving forward. It responds with confidence, even in uncomfortable circumstances. When faith becomes active, it shifts your perspective from what is impossible in human strength to what becomes possible through divine intervention and alignment. And spiritual dryness often appears when life feels empty, stagnant, and disconnected from purpose. A person may continue daily routines while inwardly feeling exhausted, uninspired, or emotionally distant. Bitterness can quietly grow through disappointment, unanswered expectations, unresolved pain, or prolonged struggle. Left unaddressed, these conditions can influence thoughts, relationships, and decisions. Breaking dryness requires intentional renewal, reflection, and the willingness to release what has become heavy within the heart. Bitterness must be replaced with healing, gratitude, and restored perspective. Renewal begins when a person chooses not to remain defined by past wounds, setbacks, disappointments, or seasons of internal drought. And consecration is the intentional act of setting apart your life, home, and decisions with purpose and spiritual awareness. It reflects a commitment to live with discipline, clarity, and alignment, rather than allowing external influences to shape every direction. A consecrated environment is cultivated through the values you protect, the habits you practice, and the atmosphere you maintain. What enters your mind, your conversations, and your surroundings gradually affects your inner condition. Guarding these spaces requires consistency and discernment. When a person becomes intentional about what they allow and what they reject, stability, peace, and order begin to increase naturally. And trusting divine timing requires patience when outcomes do not arrive according to personal expectations. Many people become discouraged when progress feels slow, opportunities seem delayed, or answers remain unclear. Timing is often connected to preparation, alignment, and unseen developments beyond immediate understanding. What feels like waiting may actually be a season of growth, refinement, and positioning. Impatience can lead to rushed decisions, frustration, and unnecessary setbacks. Trust allows a person to remain steady without forcing outcomes prematurely. Restoration is rarely instant, but unfolds through stages, lessons, and gradual change, shaping both character and readiness for what is ahead.